Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, what's up? It's your boy Joel Ortiz, and I want everybody to make sure that they subscribe and download the podcast, Library Rap, the hip-hop interviews with Tim Einenkel. Yo, Tim, I hope all is well. You my guy. I know these interviews are not interviews, they're actually conversations, and I appreciate them all. Yawa.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ice-T. I want you to do something for me. Make sure you download and subscribe Library Rap, the hip-hop interviews with Tim Einenkel. It is fucking official. All right, stop playing. Download and subscribe. Library Rap, the hip hop interviews with Tim Einenkel. It's cold.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's your boy Farrell March in the building. I need y'all to make sure you subscribe and download to the podcast Library Rap. Hip-hop interviews with your boy Tim Einenkel. You already know.
New album, Dreaming In Cursive, Mystic. It's an honor to have you on Library Rap, the hip-hop interviews with Tim Einenkel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yes, the girl who loves sparklers. I'm here.
I want to start just early in your career. I didn't know this when I was reading you. You opened and you worked alongside artists such as Outkast, those of Mischief, Leaders of the New School, and of course Digital Underground. Can you just briefly talk about what you remember, what you took away from those experiences as not just a person, but as an artist?
Yeah, so we can kind of break those down. Leaders of the New School was the first out of state New York group that I opened for. And Busta Rhymes thought I was dope. It meant the world to me. Being born and raised in the Bay Area and on the West Coast, even though there's thousands of miles that separated, it's like cassette tapes were being sent back and forth. So I was very much hearing music and then what was being released commercially. But, as you start to open for people like Leaders of the New School and then Outkast, I opened for them on their first single off their first album, right? Imagine that.
Wow.
That you start going, I think I'm on the right path. I think I'm on my way. And when you open for artists like them, and I also open for artists like KRS-One and, Ill Scratch and anybody you can kind of possibly think of. And you learn from them how to master a stage, right? As MCs, we are masters of ceremony. And you watch what people do. You watch how they move around. I think you can also observe people with their breath control. You can observe how MCs are interacting and being in a cipher on the stage, right? But with Digital Underground, I became part of Digital Underground. I'm still a member of Digital Underground. And the kind of Shock G, rest in power to our mentor and brother and fearless leader. For all the fun that is Digital Underground ran a pretty tight ship. And so going out, the studio sessions, what I learned in those studio sessions was I had to learn how to be in a studio with hella people where there were hella things going on, where my individual sessions are usually me and the engineer, right? That's super sensitive to the energy in the studio. And so I learned that, but in going out on the road, I had to be a roadie just like Pac was a roadie. I had to carry those turntables, not Serato, those turntables. And I had to set up stage and break down stage after the show. And there were very specific times to be on the stage. Shock would draw out a stage plot with the props that were on the stage. We, in fact, could be docked if we weren't on stage when we were supposed to be, if we were on stage when we were supposed to be, if we were not bringing out the props that we were supposed to bring out. So, I absorbed. And also from Digital, I learned that, you could be revolutionary, but you can have fun. And that we need to celebrate life. So kind of a long answer, but I think I got all your people in there. But it's we learn from each other. And as we approach the 50th anniversary of hip hop, like as somebody who is 48, like I feel so privileged to have literally grown up with hip hop. So what I learned from my peers and those who came before me is unlimited, and it helped to shape who I am as a master of ceremony.
I've always had this appreciation for Digital Underground, and it comes weirdly from my grandmother, who who bought me a bootleg tape of Sex Packets. And I don't know what grade. I must have been like elementary school, but actually, in hindsight, probably shouldn't have known the entire album. But
yeah.
But especially, she. The only thing I remember about the bootleg tape was that side A was side B and side B was side A.
Yeah.
But
you think that's what grade you were in? For me, when that album dropped, I think I was still in high school, or I dropped out of high school and I was working with children. But I got brought into digital. There's kind of different iterations, and I was getting brought in while Pac was still alive. I was 20 years old, 19, 20 years old, being brought into digital. So like, I'm sure you can imagine, and maybe your listeners can imagine, being, a teenager, coming out of being a teenager and just being a really young person. The crew I came up with is Hieroglyphics, being around this kind of magnificent, and then being brought into this legendary crew is just like not anything that I ever imagined, right? I'm not sure we all of us ever imagined that hip hop would turn into what it is today.
Yeah, when you started, what did you think? It obviously was this expression, right? This art form, but did you think it had legs to go 50? It's continuously going, but to reach 50, or did you think
did we ever even think about being 50? You know what I mean?
No.
I'm not sure that I thought about hip hop being 50, but again, like my mom had me when she was 21. My mom was into hip hop. And so she was the person who was cutting out pages in the pink section and taking me to see the movies, and she was buying vinyl, and all I knew is that it resonated with me. And that it was exciting, and that as I was growing up in the 80s and Reaganomics, like what we were experiencing in our communities was being reflected in the music. But for me, maybe because I came up with so many male artists, right? And had male friends, I too didn't even think that I would live past the age of 25, right? The 80s and 90s were deep. Mm-hmm. And so with hip hop, no, I didn't think it would become like the largest genre in the world and be in these commercials, or, I didn't think anything I made would be in commercials or be in films, but I knew that I had to do it, and I would do it regardless of whether I ever put out a record, right? That hip hop culture itself, from the dancing to the beautiful graffiti to the DJing to the MCing, all of it, we know that it's very much a youth culture, right? Is when people start in, it's a youth culture. But I happen to be, I think, part of the second generation, right? Since I was born in 74, of the second generation with it. So like, we actually were the young people. We didn't have people who were 50 and 60. We didn't have people who had been through the pitfalls or experienced the highest of highs to be there to kind of give us that kind of guidance and educate us about labels and do all those things. We had to figure it out.
You said something in a interview, and you talked about owning your own masters, but and the question is not going to be about the importance of owning your own masters. It's more about what else you said. So you said, quote, "I think the benefit of owning that means nobody else gets to sell my trauma, nobody else gets to sell my healing." And I think it's important for us, and this is you responding to the importance of owning your own masters, but what I think is amazing about that quote is that it's you reiterating that you're okay, your willingness to show your vulnerability and share your true self with us and go through that healing process. When did you, or who did you learn from that this would be the way you wanted to express yourself, or what you want to express yourself doing in the art?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. So my mother always made sure I was in the arts growing up. I grew up without a television, so I was writing stories and poems when I was in elementary, but was full on poet in junior high and all through high school. And having experienced the trauma, the art saved my life. And I knew no other way to be than vulnerable. And also, if you look at, writing that I was reading, whether it was about Assata Shakur, Angela Davis, or the fact that I was working as a young, educator in an after school program with one of Erica Huggins' children. She was at one time Minister of Education for the Black Panthers. What I understood was that pain and that trauma is something that is shared. But I also just had this fierce belief that we are more similar and more connected than we often think that we are. I didn't know that so many people were going to connect to the vulnerability or the pain or the trauma. But I think part of the reason that happened is because I've also, no matter what has happened to me, I fiercely believe in love. I fiercely believe that we can transform ourselves in the world and we can make it a better place and we can have more justice. And so, yeah, on one hand, the vulnerability, absolutely intentional. On the other hand, it's just, I didn't know any other way to be. As somebody who grew up and people thought was going to go and, study creative writing at some small East Coast college, turning into an MC was quite a breakaway on my path, but it made perfect sense. And it was, I've always said, and I'll end after this, but I've always said that a blank piece of paper is the most powerful place, because on a blank piece of paper, I can berate myself, I can honor myself, I can write down what I imagine that does not yet exist. And it was my safe place. I am somebody, I don't mind speaking about it. I was raped before the age of 13, and I told no one. And that page saved my life. That blank page saved my life because everything that I was not saying to anybody was on that page. And so I think natural progression through developing as an MC, that those things stayed on the page. It's kind of interesting to reflect on it and kind of analyze it. But I think, yeah, I knew no other way. And I also just thought, you remember these conversations about who is real and who's not real, and who's writing lyrics that are not, that they're lying in what they're saying. As an MC, we're supposed to be creative, but there are people who completely fabricate,
right?
Even trauma in their lyrics. And so, of course, I was going to keep it real. At some point I said, no, I ain't got to claim to keep it real. Right? Because you can see the pain in my step. You can see this in my eyes. You can see what my life is. But I'm really thankful that people could also see that I was loving and bright and a vibrant heart and spirit underneath the trauma.
Was there ever any pushback by people in terms of maybe you're, maybe they're maybe you're sharing too much and people are not going to gravitate to it, and maybe you should kind of change up a little bit lyrically of what you're trying to convey, or were people more receptive to it?
Yeah, I think I was just so fiercely committed to doing what I was doing, right? Even though I had never done it before when I made the first album, I was very clear on what I was doing. The only pushback that I got was actually on the song Once a Week, interestingly enough, which Once a Week being a song that is about being empowered as a woman to make decisions about how you want your relationships, sexual relationships, physical relationships, and just kind of vibe relationships to work out. And so there was some pushback on that it was perhaps kind of in conflict with the fact that I talk about saving babies and I talk about corrupt politicians and the prison industrial complex. But my thing was that I wasn't going to take it off the album. That first, all my albums, all my art is a reflection of where I am at at that moment. And so, yeah, that's the only song that I got pushback on, but nobody could have warned me. And I mentor a lot of young people who want to be in the music business now, not just as artists, but some of them want to be behind the scenes and do tour management. Some of them want to be producers. Some of them want to be lawyers. But underneath, a lot of them are creatives. But for the ones who have experienced trauma, right? And we talk about this as we kind of define our mentor-mentee relationship, and I try to understand how I can best support these young people on their journeys, is I try to have them understand, be open, be who you are in the art that you create, but also be aware of what you share and prepare yourself for what you share. It's okay to make art and not share it with the world. Your art is your art. If it's part of your mechanism for healing, you don't have to put that into a capitalist kind of framework for it to be valuable. Use your art for yourself, but understand people, it's like, why do people stop and slow down and stare at car crashes, right? And the music industry makes a ton of money off of people, particularly in hip hop, who have experienced trauma. And so just understand, you need to define your story. You need to control your story. Even if you're signed to a label, even if that's your goal, you need to own that. That's yours. And when I walked away from my record deal after that first album, I literally was willing to walk away from my master's, walk away from everything to get my freedom, right? And I just think that, I don't know, it's like, as I talk about it, it's, I don't know, that going back to the quote that you spoke about nobody else gets to sell, my trauma or my healing. I walked away from it and I was peace with doing that, but I definitely was like, wow, they own the song I wrote about my dad dying from a heroin overdose and talking about being raped. And I walked away. But in some ways, that was walking away from the pain, but that's a whole different question. And I was able to do a bunch of healing when I stepped back from the music industry.
Did you completely stop? I mean, did you completely step back in the sense that you stopped writing rhyme, or was it just more? Did it go back to like more writing for self?
Yeah, no, I stepped back from the industry as in no more being signed to a label, no more lawyer, no more booking agent, no more accountant. I was fully in that framework, right? And so the trajectory that I was on, I probably would have continued to go even higher if I stayed on it. But when I stepped back, it was like I stepped away from everything except for the art. The art is mine. I write poems and I write rhymes for me. And so I stepped back, but I also began, just from the music industry. That's why I try to be really clear about that part. I stepped back from the music business, the music industry, but I began to create art with Eli from Living Legends. And we were just creating music, and I wasn't creating it for any album. I wasn't creating it for a label. I wasn't trying to get put on. I wasn't trying to get distribution. It was just to make art. I know far too many MCs and other folks in our culture who have been in this business, who this business turned them into people who hate what they used to love. And I never, ever, ever wanted to be or want to be that person. So I think it's important to make a distinction. Like, this is my art. It doesn't actually belong to anybody else unless I decide to share it.
I think I saw a quote from just now, actually, just coincidental. I forgot who it was, but some MC who stepped back and went away from the industry and said, like, I didn't realize how dark, what such a dark place I was in until I stepped back. Yeah.
So I know I was still broken when I left, right? As much as I believe in love and beauty and the life video is all bright and colorful and there's children and all these, I was still a broken Black girl, as I call it. And what I know without a doubt, and I left and I enrolled in school. I was a high school dropout, and I took my GED. And so when I stepped back from the music business, I started community college, and I fell in love with like knowledge and learning, and just had all this time to fall in love and fall out and work on my healing and further define who I was as this, you know, woman in my late 20s, early 30s. And what I know, and maybe I can't really like describe properly, is that, or here's the easiest way to say it. If I had not stepped back from the industry and gone on my path and I was pursuing education to be of service to children who are my heart, that I'm not sure that I would be alive today. I'm not sure that I would be the healed Black woman who I am today if I had not stepped back. The music industry is not here to love you. The music industry is not here to help you heal. That's not what it's built for. And so stepping back from it, and I know some other folks who have stepped back from it to raise their children, to just, you know, pursue education, do other things. We are incredibly diverse. People have gone into film, they're professors, they're, you know, just so many different things. When we start off young and we want to be masters of ceremony, and we want to step into a world, right, where hip hop is real, and we want to be in this place. And I think we're almost willing to, like, you know, sacrifice ourselves for our art. And as we get older, and if we find some level of success like I did, that you kind of have to make some decisions about how you get to continue to grow as a human and how you get to heal. And so for me, yeah, that's not why I stepped back from the music business, but I know that it saved my life. And I know that it was really important, and it was great to go from being on TV. When I started school, my stickers were up in like the restroom stalls. I was like, oh my goodness, people talking to me in the women's section of the grocery store, you know, which I'm not complaining. I love the people who support me, but it was also really nice to just go back to life and to go back to living and not have to care about, you know, it's not like I just let myself go, but I don't have to get dressed for TV. I don't have to do these things. And to go doing interview after interview after interview, talking about your pain and your healing, I think can get to be a bit much. So I know that's a long answer, but the last thing I'll say on it is that, you know, sometimes you just have to step away from that. Every time we perform songs that are connected to our trauma, they can continue to kind of have us hold that trauma until we're actually healed from it. So, you know, there's songs that I can perform from that first album, but, you know, like I don't perform the song for my dad. I maybe performed it like 5 times in my life. And part of what I learned, and part of, hopefully I'd like to impart to, particularly if there's, you know, younger artists who are listening, is, you know, hold on to yourself. Hold on to yourself in the midst of all of this. I think it's really important. And I think it can be really easy to get lost.
Did you notice major differences for you writing wise? Let's say pre the Life coming out, right? To writing for an album, to then walking away and writing once again for yourself. Did you see, you know, major difference in terms of what you were able to write and how creative you could be? Because I imagine writing for an album, there's a lot of pressure to do that in many, you know, but at the same time, you're also, to your point, you're kind of changing, you know, you're in the industry, you're changing, and you might not realize it at the time, but then you step away and you realize that you are. So did you notice major differences in I guess, the writing process for you in those 3 different times?
Wonderful question. In writing Cuts for Luck and Scars for Freedom, The Life was recorded midway or almost 3/4 of the way through that album. So writing that song didn't define that album. I mean, I think for some people who were in the studio that night, there was something that was clear to them about the power of that song. But so it didn't really impact that. And then once everything was kind of, blowing up and I'm all over TV and radio and stuff, there were options that were coming in to do collaborations and stuff. And I've always been super picky with that. But I didn't find my writing to be different in terms of my process, right? And part of my process is like, I have to have something to say to sit down and write. Absolutely. Sometimes I sit down to write just as lyrical exercise, right? Lyrical fitness. And to play with styles. I love playing with styles, even if people don't feel like I put a lot of them in my songs. I love playing with them. And, so that doesn't change, but what changed through, I think, making the first album and then making the second album, Beautiful Resistance, is that I became way less concerned about whether people thought I rhymed or I sang, or I was a spoken word artist or a poet. Like, I came to the understanding, and this started, within Digital Underground, that we have an entire toolbox as artists. And why would I limit myself? Why would I be concerned about what other people think? Right? As I kind of said, I think before we hopped on, but with The Life, I was horrified that people were going to see the video version that had no rap in it and didn't know I rapped. And then you had a bunch of people who heard it and they didn't think it was me rapping on it. They just thought I was singing on it and somebody else rapped on it. The people who got the album understood that there was far more rapping than there was singing. And so as I progressed, and somebody said about the most new album, they said, "Oh, you're singing more. I love the album, but you're singing more." And actually, I think I just became more balanced after that first album. And whatever the story is that needs to be told that's inside of me or that's in the music that I get from a producer, that really tells me whether I'm going to rhyme or sing or both or do spoken word. So going back to, did it impact the way that I write? Not so much, but I think the healing journey impacts how I write, and the womanhood journey impacts how I write. And stepping outside of feeling like I am beholden to proving myself to people, which is part of what being an MC is about, is that it just, I became way less concerned. Like, I'm here to write for myself. And I realized that writing is it's one of the most selfish acts that we can do. When I sit down and write my songs, even if I am writing to the community and what's happening in the world, I am writing for myself, right? I'm writing because of where my mind state is, or how my emotions are triggered, or because of something that I've observed, but it's really about me. And that's why I've kind of talked about, in connection with the newest album, Dreaming in Cursive, is I'm able to really identify now that the making of the art is a sacred process. And I don't know, I kind of know when to start it, and I know when I feel like the concept is kind of, I've done what I need to do with it. I've said what I need to say in this particular space and time, in this moment, on this frequency. And then from there, then you step into how do we release it, and what happens with it, and marketing, promotion, and how do other people receive it, and how do they experience it? But that sacred process itself, that's not about anybody except for me and the universe or God and the musicians or the producer. That's it.
Greetings.
want to actually, I want to turn to the album, Dreaming in Cursive. It's. I think the name of the album itself is great. It just sparks like imagination, right off the bat. So if we briefly talk about what's behind the name. I mean, how is the process come up with the name prior to the album, or was it during the recording or after, or you just talk more about the name?
Yeah, I thought the name for this third album from years ago was going to be called Praying on AstroTurf. And that's a whole nother thing that we might talk about one year if I make that album, because it's a very specific kind of concept. But I didn't come up with a title before. I wanted to call it Love Songs or Everyday Love Songs. But all those titles were taken. Because every song on the album is its own kind of love song. Love for myself, love for community, love for the planet, love for incarcerated peoples, love for women, love for our collective children, love for justice, love. Every song is a love song, even if it's talking about, like on Unguarded, on that poem, and love not working out maybe the way that I wanted it to. They're all love songs. But so that wasn't available. So I started thinking about how cursive. So this is going to be one of my longer answers, but it makes sense.
Okay.
I think part of what I started thinking about, I had been deeply inspired. When COVID started, I was the lead kindergarten teacher for an after-school program, and I was recording the album during that time. And there was one day that I was making a picture, and all my kinder people know I love hearts and glitter and all this stuff. And I make a heart and it's glitter, and I write in cursive, the world needs more love, or the world is in need of more love. My kinder people can't read cursive. They don't know how to make cursive, but I have this belief. If you sit down at a table as a facilitator with art supplies and you start making art, your children, your students, your kinder people, your humans will sit down and start making art with you. And these children, they start sitting down and writing out in cursive. They ask me what mine says, and they're writing in cursive, even though it doesn't look like mine. And a parent comes to pick up one of the children, and the daughter runs over to the mother and says, "The world needs more love." And this parent looks at me like, oh, this has to come from you, right? It's this beautiful, beautiful moment. But I'm thinking about cursive. I'm also thinking about these ideas that cursive is being removed from schools. And it's really only in wealthier schools that children are still being taught about cursive. So anyways, these things are kind of sitting inside. That's part of what I call input. That's before you start stepping into the studio and creating. Life is input. Art is output. And so these things are sitting inside, and I'm thinking about how all the pieces of myself from when I was a child, before I experienced trauma, to where I am as a healed Black woman now, my belief in love and magic and community and the world, that these things are all woven together. Like, I still believe in them now as an adult, just like I did as a child. And so I'm dreaming in cursive. I'm still that girl. I am closer to being that vibrant, trauma-free little girl. I'm closer to being her where I am in my life now than I've ever been. And so that's part of the dreaming in cursive, and the connections and the love and community are all connected, like the letters in cursive. And then the girl who loves sparklers is also tying back to that girl before the trauma. My godmother used to take me to a beach, and I remember spinning in circles and playing with sparklers and just being delighted. And never could I have foreseen what I would have to survive. And so, again, to go through a long healing journey and get to where I am and be making my healed Black woman music is, I still love sparklers. I'm still that girl. And, there's people who write tons of books about how we need to nurture our inner child, right? And what did our child self not receive? What do they need? And I'm delighted that I'm as close to that beautiful girl who I was than I've been since I was that girl. And so that's where the title came from. And also, I just make long titles, and I also love the sound of sparklers, right? Whispers, and it sounds magical, and I think I forgot to use adjective about imagination, but that is also what this title is about. Because as I previously referenced, our art can reimagine our current life experience, but we can also imagine that which does not yet exist.
After the intro track, there's Here Alive, Spirits High, and you started off with young stars. I often think we failed you, but look around the world, you can see we were failed too. And I love that line because I think what it does, it breaks down that wall that it's not, oh boy, this, old person's going to talk to me and talk at me as a young person. It's more like, because that's the problem. I think what we do at our age, we talk at kids, right? We don't talk with kids. And I think what that line does is like, no, we were failed as well. And let's go on this journey together and figure out the healing process together. And I'm here for you if you need me, and I hope you're there for me. Can you talk about the opening line, but also talk about that track? I think it's like, it's one of, I have to say, I listened to the album many times. I listened to this track many, many, many times.
I love it. A lot of people have gravitated towards this song, which I love because it's all about affirming and loving us up as young people, as men, as women, just as humans. But that opening line, I facilitate with the lifespan. I don't just work with kinder people. They're just my favorite people. But I facilitate from kindergarten to people who are incarcerated and serving life. And you can see that we were failed too. There's this point where we need to connect. And I say, look, when I facilitate with young people, I'm like, this is about you. This is about where you want to go and the solutions that you want to create. I'm here to stand beside you. I will stand in front of you if I need to protect you, but I'm not here to lead you. But let us understand that, like, there are some gems I learned along the way that you shouldn't have to battle to figure out. But if we look at the movements that are happening around the world and we look at the young people, it allows me to say, the young people are all right. It's the old people who have the issues. It's the kids are fine. The grown people who don't know how to love each other and treat each other. But so, yeah, that opening line of also saying, like, I feel like sometimes younger people, when we show up to speak, they think we've always been the way that we are. And we've always kind of had it figured out, or we've always been in these places, or always had these positions. And that's not the case. The same way that these young people are in the street, I was in the street. I believe that they can help shift the paradigm of the current world to a paradigm that is more just and loving and equitable, right? I believe in that. So that's where that comes from. And also, I don't think that we say enough as big people. I don't think we acknowledge enough how hard it is to be a young person and what young people have to live through and survive through. And look at the world. Look at the climate crisis. Look at the inequalities. Look at the white supremacy. Look at the white nationalism. Look at the economic inequalities, the health inequalities. Look at all these things. And then plus you're a young person and your prefrontal cortex is not even all the way connected and your hormones are changing. And like, you're trying to figure out how you connect to the world. And that's a lot. And if any big person forgets what that kind of adventure is to be a young person, I think that's part of where we lose the connection. And so in saying that, you too, I often think we failed you, but look, you can see that we were failed too, is like to say, look, I understand that it's really hard for you. It's hard for me too, but look, we're also still super beautiful and powerful and worthy and amazing. And then there was a second part to your question, because I stayed on that line. Oh, Here Alive. You know what I was thinking about in some ways when I heard that piece of music and started thinking about it, and the way that the singing comes in the beginning, me too alive. It starts really quiet and coming in. I was thinking about Outkast, the Gemini album. I was thinking about organized noise. I was thinking about this kind of like this feel, right? And that was part of that was just part of what I heard in the music when Walt Licker, who produced the entire album, when he played that song, I thought that's what it is. But I've mentored a lot of young people, and I say the same thing a lot of times, which is, look, and I tell big people this too, there is no way around it. You can only go through it. And I think with all the struggles that we have in the world, it's important to love people up. And Here Alive, hopefully what you feel, even if it's on a subconscious level, is that it is about loving you up. It is about loving the listener up, acknowledging that this is really hard. But yeah, this is really beautiful. And so yeah, Here Alive, because look, we've recently had conversations. We've had losses in our communities from suicide, from drug overdoses. All kinds of tragic events. And again, it's hard to get through this life, even when you're more grown. And I think sometimes we just need to be able to, through our art or standing face to face with somebody, say, I honor what you are going through. I also love you. And I also know that the only way for us to get through this is to go through it and to be together. And I think a thread that goes through all of my music is I've been walking this line that's like, look, the world is totally falling apart, and look, we are beautiful and awesome, and we can heal and we can make it. And I think that Here Alive, as I talk about it with you, I think that in some ways Here Alive is a perfect representation of me walking that.
Even if you sell dope, the world's unequal. Beaten and abused, even disappeared, but also worshipped and deeply revered. We're loving all forms, parts of our communities. We could start wars, or we could bring unity. Don't tell us to smile. We're no one's property. It's a gift if we love you and hold you softly. My lover, you are priceless and worthy. Perfectly imperfect. Tell yourself, I love you. Say it loud. I got me. Infinite potential. Feeling so fly.
How do you decide when a track deserves to be spit on versus you singing on it? And I asked this referencing the fact track Magic, Let Yourself Go.
Yeah.
How do you, what is the, I guess, what is the rhyme or reason behind it? And also, is there stuff that you could say as a singer that wouldn't convey well if you rhymed it?
Yeah. I think making the decision to rhyme or sing is totally tied to the energy, the vibe, and the frequency of the music that I receive. There is a story in each piece of music that I select from a producer. If your music does not tell me a story, then I'm not going to be drawn to it. It has to, upon first, second listen, it has to touch something in me. It has to tell me a story somewhere in me, or draw out a story somewhere in me to connect to it. When I made the first album, I literally was like, when I sequenced it, I'm like, oh, this is rap, and this is song, and this is this thing, and these are these things. And I wasn't where I am now, where again, I have removed the kind of boundary that I felt or that I felt like hip hop wrapped around all of us. And so it's really just about how it feels. And so for Magic, Let It Go, like that track to me just sounds like such an Oakland track. It sounds like such a town beat, or it sounds like something you would hear in the South, which is why, you know, the magic, she could show you magic, which is actually done by somebody from the South. That it called to me. I felt very pimpish, and somebody asked me, like, "Well, you advocate for women. How can you talk about, you know, being pimpish?" And it's really that piece of music just made me feel, as a woman, it made me feel like I kind of want to talk my shit. I'm sorry, I don't know if I can cuss on here, but it made me want to pop my collar. It made me want to say, I can show you some things from this place where I'm a grown woman. And that did feel like I needed to sing it. I wanted to swagger and sing it, but also that particular music, that would have been a very slow rap song. And look, I was known for writing raps over things that were, you know, 69 BPMs and what have you back in the day. So very slow. It's not that it can't be done, but that piece of music, it didn't call to be rapped on. But it's also just like, how do I feel that day? And what is this kind of song? What does it mean? It's like going to the other really singing song on the album, Still Love. There is no way that I could have rapped that song. I could have never expressed that particular emotion that way. And sometimes rapping is the best way to kind of channel and explore the pain or the emotion. And sometimes singing is for that. And Still Love is this perfect representation of, it feels still in some ways, not to use the title itself, but there is something about that piece of music that when the instrument comes in, which I say they sound like bagpipes, but they're not. But when I heard that sound at the beginning of Still, it sounded like bagpipes at a burial. And that made me think it made me think about, oh wow, I am ready to kind of bury and put to rest this journey that I have been on with this man and this place that we have moved into after these years and years. And the way to do this is to tell the story how it happened. Nobody else knows how that story happened except for me and him. And he and I have never been in a better place. And, you know, we've never been together and we have a totally healthy relationship. But that piece of music that demanded it, but those bagpipes and that burial sound and the feel of that opened up in me like, oh, I'm ready to tell the story.
So it's interesting you say Still Love. I had a question about Still Love, and you answered it, because my question was, I was wondering if it was about a particular person, but then when I heard the scratches on it, I was like, oh, maybe it's about hip hop.
Oh, it's not about hip hop, but that's the great thing about interpretation of art. So it can absolutely be that, but for me, it is about a person. But if you hear it and think about hip hop, I think that's awesome.
I was just like, oh, maybe this is like a kind of a subtle way of, giving the O to the scratch.
Like the Portishead stuff.
Right.
Like the early stuff, scratches, you have singing, you have this kind of very almost esoteric energy. You have these things. And I don't know that I was drawing from Portishead when I wrote Still, but I'm definitely a Portishead fan. Going back to when I was being mailed cassettes from New York. My homies in New York upped me on Portishead. And yeah, so we've seen, and I've also worked with the Angel, who is a producer and an artist, and she's mentored me, and she creates super vibey music and drum and bass and hip hop and like all these different things. So when I talked about earlier, when you asked me like how was I inspired or shaped or whatever the language was about like opening for people or touring or what have you, having a mentor like the Angel also impacts to this day how I create. So the scratches seem totally, and the way the scratch is drawn out, it's not like this fast scratch. It's love, love. And, I stood in the studio and I said love in all these different ways. And then Walter took those and scratched, and he took those and he scratched them in. So, yeah, I don't know. It's nice to add texture to music. And that love part is also kind of like, it's a way to give you a break in the energy as a listener. I am deeply interested in how music impacts the way that we feel. And I have always been really sensitive about and cared about for the people listening, if I'm leading you through a heavier or darker place or a more painful place, and still love, even though it's really beautiful, right? It's still a burial. It's still a burial. And I think also I'm somebody who's always been interested in like singing or rhyming about things that are painful or hard, but making them sound pretty. Life is hard enough. At least make the music sound pretty. Although I love my grimy, New York shit. Because that also triggers emotion. It's a certain energy and a certain vibe. So I love my MOP.
You're my favorite lover, miles above the others. We're smooth like summertime flows. You're a king, black brother, when you smile and glow. Laugh bright like the sun lives inside your soul. Our silhouette is like a key to a lock. You used to be a D-boy, so glad you stopped it.
That gets me to the track Butter, Green Light. I was surprised to read that, I think that your quote is, you wrote it while dating a man I knew I would not end up in a relationship with. And you listen to it and then you see the video and you're like, wow, this is like a happy ever after and, ending in a way. But then your quote is that I'm not going to end up in a relationship with this man.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
It took me all my life to figure out how to do that. After having my heart broken so many times, right? By having these desires or want, like I think growing up, we might think that everybody is it. And what life shows us is that they are absolutely not. But it doesn't mean that we can't have great lovers. I don't have to marry you. We don't have to be together forever, but we could be lovers, right? And that's why that song is saying lover in the chorus and calling out lovers in the beginning. And with the particular man that I was dating, like I knew that if I actually did go down that road, that it would not be a good experience. So the good experience was just being lovers and being in that moment. And then what you see in the video, I think is really important that you note. And I'll take a minute to talk about it. Butter Green Light, the video, is part of a Black Love trilogy, which will be a short film, but it's comprised of 3 songs from the album, which are Butter Green Light, Still Love, and Always Love Always. And these songs are not connected on the album. The love songs on the album, Butter is the Magic is the I can show you some things and I'm sexy and there's a whole universe and all these things, right? Butter is I'm dating you and it feels good and it's lovely and it's wonderful and I don't know what it'll be, but I'm good here. And then Still is yeah, we tried and failed. This is tragic. And then Always Love Always is not one of the relationship love songs on the album, but Always Love Always is about the collective and how love always wins. And so what I ended up going through when I was writing the script and I was working with my co-director and co-writer, Yellow Wind, that I've always been so about keeping it real. And unless I literally have sat down to write a fairy tale, which I did on Beautiful Resistance, Eyes of Diamond, a fairy tale. And I love that fairy tale, but it's talking about 1,000 years and all of these things. Obviously it's a fairy tale. It's called a fairy tale. But when I first started writing out the script, it was kind of literal, but then I made a decision that the representation of Black love that I wanted to uplift in creating this short film would be about a journey where the man and the woman meet. Part 2 or chapter 2 will be still love. And in this kind of alternate reality, he and I are exploring this pain, and we come out on the other side wanting to pursue the redemption that can be found in Black love. And it moves into Always Love Always, which is about placing Black love in the context of community and the importance of community in our intimate and personal relationships. So I stepped away from the album. Still on the album is about a burial. It's about the closure of something. In a Black love trilogy, it opens an opportunity for myself and my co-star, who is the legendary Ray Love from the Bay Area and Digital Underground family. It gives the opportunity for us to decide we want to save our love. We want to continue to walk through it. And I really wanted to put that visual narrative in the world. I wanted to put an additional conversation in the world that says, love is not always easy, but there is power, and Black love is revolutionary. Love is revolutionary, period. Black love is revolutionary, and love has saved me over and over and over and over and over again. So I hope that answers your question, but there is a difference, and that's the creative license. And that's why a Black love trilogy as a whole is a film. The standalone videos, they represent what they represent exactly who they were written about. And Butter was written while I was dating that particular man. Magic was written after I stopped dating that man, and I was like, I can do whatever I want. And Still was written Still is its totally own world and experience. Is told.
The final track on the album is "Dreaming Out Loud." It's the outro. It's spoken word, and it really explains the purpose of the album. And it's, for me, it was a track that could easily be the intro track, but you kind of go out with it. Why placement having "Dreaming Out Loud" as the final track on the album?
I put a lot of intention into the way that I sequence my albums. And I know that we're in a digital world where people just jump around from track to track. But I have always, on all of my albums, there's a spoken word outro. And it always presents kind of a summary, so to speak. But also a path forward, pointing forward. And so I wouldn't put it at the beginning because that would tell you what it's all about. Instead, it begins with greetings, and I welcome you in and say, I have some stories to share, right? Like a Shel Silverstein poetry book. I have some stories to share. Turn it up louder, right? Come closer and turn it up louder. And so Dreaming Out Loud goes at the end. It was also written at the, I think I want to say it was actually recorded last, although we might have been tweaking a couple of things. And I think it makes sense there. And I always like to point out the last thing we actually hear on the album are children laughing. It's also the first thing that we hear on the album. This goes back to the intentionality of the sequencing and how I want to impact the way the listener feels. And Dreaming Out Loud it's not just a song title. Dreaming Out Loud is a framework, kind of a conceptual framework that I developed when I was co-facilitating youth roundtables with a Schools Not Prisons campaign throughout the state of California with Revolve Impact. And so in these youth roundtables, again, intentional language, I was a co-facilitator. I wasn't their leader. Myself and Andres would co-facilitate, and it was about facilitating a space where these young people from teens into their early 20s could talk about schools not prisons, and sometimes how schools are like prisons, and talk about the challenges that are being faced. But dreaming out loud, as I say in that ending piece, is not about simply stopping at identifying the challenges that exist. It's about creating the solutions. It's about claiming the joy. It's about defining where we want to go. And I fiercely believe that young people have amazing ideas about how we can improve our communities and our world. And we just don't necessarily listen to them. We go, oh, that's great. That's fascinating. But something that I'm interested in is what happens if we facilitate spaces where the ideas, the solutions can be further kind of worked through, designed, imagined, all those things. So Dreaming Out Loud is about coming together with a group of people to identify the issues that are in your community, but also creating the solutions and making sure we don't get stuck. I always try to get people, everybody should watch The Never Ending Story. And Atreyu is stuck, right? He's stuck in the nothingness, sinking into the nothingness. And that's what I kind of think of when we get together and all we do is talk about the problems. Dreaming Out Loud is the hope. It's the push forward. It's where we want to go so we can make sure we don't sink into the nothingness. And so Dreaming Out Loud is that closing piece where I'm making wishes for babies being born, and I'm saying that certain people they shouldn't run the world. And I'm talking about how I facilitate magic and closing and saying, and I still love sparklers, right? To make it make sense, because as we discussed the title and you hear all the things that are kind of connected to it, I understand that it's a lot, but the same way you thought still might could be about hip hop, art is about interpretation. And although I have specific stories to tell and specific emotions and the journey, and I put all this work into the intentionality, into the sequencing, into the interludes that are on Dreaming in Cursive, those are all super intentional. But then when I offer it to you, when I offer it to the world, it's whatever you make with it and however you feel it. And Dreaming Out Loud is kind of that, like, okay, go into the world and may we be blessed and loved, and may we hold on to our magic and our imagination.
Such an honor to talk to you. The new album is Dreaming in Cursive, The Girl Who Loves Sparklers. Mystic, thank you so much for everything, and thank you for all that you do.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me on here, Tim. It's such an honor. Thank you for the brilliant questions, and thank you for taking the care to provide a platform where we as members of the hip hop culture can be taken seriously and can talk about our writing processes and our journeys. It was my honor to be here today.
Birth in this moment. Dreaming out loud means we seek and find joy and then own it. And even if the world had ended today, which it did, we would still be magic, not bound by any man or system. We would still be love, still be community, still be dreaming in cursive, and I would still love sparklers. Love.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.